Hi, Alan. I'm Tyson.
I'm Colin.
Ryan?
And I'm Adam.
We're the Gamesmiths, and we just got done playing with Spectrum Force, and we had a really great time. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was how well you did at making us interact with each other on one another's turn. That was really cool to me to be able to see that, well, it's Colin's turn, and I can either reserve my hand to do my own turn to try and do these special things, but then later on, perhaps it may be more advantageous to support somebody else. And I really liked that it felt like a team. When I think of the Power Rangers, when I think of the exact kind of theme that you're going for, I felt that team element that I thought was really strong in the way that you set that up with the interaction. It reminded me a little bit of Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. It's a deck building game and has the ability to do a lot of different things just like yours is and have that interaction. But my one concern about this game that I wanted to talk about is the potential for change. You have a static deck, and having a static deck, and I'm assuming because this says it was scenario 1, I'm assuming you're going to have a bunch of different scenarios. This is all assumptions, but I'm assuming that you're going to change different bosses, you're going to change and add more minions and things like that. And so one of my concerns was having a static deck, but your scenarios are changing and things are changing. You're going to feel your character really well, and you may get really good at it, and you may be able to switch decks and say, I'm going to be the red Spectrum Force player this time, and get some variability that way. But one of my concerns was just that having a static deck and not potentially having anything added to my deck as I progress through different scenarios may make it feel like the only thing that's happening is the game is getting harder, but I'm not developing any skills or abilities or any strengths that help me combat these additional things. There's no potential progression in my own character development.
That's good.
But there is progression in the enemy development. And again, that's all speculative, but that was one of my concerns with it. I don't know if anybody else felt anything along that lines or could add to that.
I think even in that scenario, it just puts the onus on the player to improve as opposed to the deck. So it's not harder. The game doesn't get harder if you increase the power level of the deck with the game. The game gets harder when you increase the challenge, and now it's up to your skill level and your proper ability to assess when to use a card when, or how to use a deck properly. You know, like, you can put up a scenario so easy that anybody can stumble through it without any competency in the game, but then you can bring forward another scenario where if, certain enemies have 30 armor, and so you have to use piercing damage to take them down. And if you don't do that right, or you don't use your piercing cards right, or you don't know that there are piercing cards in your deck that you need to find, kind of thing like that, then the experience can change that way as well. Is you give them a static set of tools that if used optimally can take down the most difficult scenario, but if used awkwardly can take down an easier scenario. Well, so I think there is value in building a strong, solid deck and then increasing the challenge. And
I do see the way that you could do that. Like, I mean, I felt like the first scenario you want to be really easy and really accessible and easy to learn for every player, and so you don't want to make it stack too far against you. You have the Spectrum Force life. I can't remember what that was called, the Spectrum Power.
Yeah.
That could go down. I could easily see that being that later on in other scenarios you actually have been hampered, or whatever the narrative is behind it, you start with less spectrum power, or etc.
That is straight up. So there are different difficulty levels, just even within the scenarios that I didn't really touch on in the rules explanation because it wasn't really germane to it. But so we started at 3 spectrum power, and then we got a boost because of the scenario. But that's easy mode. So medium is starting at 2, hard is starting at 1, and then you also increase the number of minions that you start against. So we played easy once again. So we started same number of minions as players. If you do normal, then it's same players plus 1, and if you do hard, it's players plus 1.
Well, see, and that's perfect. So, and that's exactly kind of what I was hoping for with the progression of the scenarios. However, still would feel like if there's no way for one of my favorite things, whether or not it's any type of media, whether or not it's movies or books or any type of forum where you're doing the creative process, one of my favorite things is character progression. And if I don't feel like a character is progressing in a TV show that I'm watching or in a book that I'm reading, then I don't feel like there's a lot to go off of. If they start off as the most powerful they're going to be, and they're not going to adjust to the challenges or whatever, and they have the same unique set of tools from the start to the beginning, that's my concern with it, is that I do see that there is room for improvement in as far as progression of character goes.
Well, let's think about Power Rangers. What did they do to make it fresh?
Right.
They use the same characters for 1 or 2 seasons, then they switch up the cast and they do a whole new thing. So maybe you are this Yellow Ranger, but then you become, I don't know, instead of Treen Eye, you turn into, I don't remember what the next one after Treen Eye was. Because they don't really, they're pretty one-dimensional in the show. They don't really change their moves or do anything special. So,
and I
get what Tyson's saying though, because I think can be a lot of variability in your scenarios and in your bosses, which is really cool. And that actually, you don't have them here, or at least in the print and play that we got, it wasn't in there. Whether you've designed them or not, I don't know. But I would be excited to play it again to just see the next boss. What can he do? How is he going to hurt us? What's the next scenario? I love that you're changing them both up, the boss and the scenario. What new power-ups are out there as buildings, and is one potentially weaker and more fragile than the other? Is one stronger? Whatever that may be, it's really cool that you're changing all that. And I didn't notice that until Tyson had said something, but there's no variability in your person. So
other than randomness,
one of the games that has been my all-time favorite so far has been Legendary. I love that game. I've bought all the expansions I can buy of it. I played it a ton. Would still love playing it now. And it's very similar to this game if you've never played it. I assume you have, because there's a lot of similarities.
You have to have played it.
There's a lot of similarities. And
you know what we're talking about.
Not at all would I call this a ripoff of Legendary, because I don't think it is. It seems very unique. I actually was very impressed. But in Legendary, it is a deck builder. So even though the cards in the deck don't change, you've got the same characters with the same powers all the time. You're drafting those cards, you're purchasing those cards, so you don't know what your decks can end up looking like. Every time what your player can do is different. And that's something that I really like about the game. And so I didn't think the game needed it. I didn't think the game was lacking because it didn't have the character development piece. But I think that is a really good opportunity if you're interested in exploring that direction. Again, I love the variability in these types of games. It did feel very Power Rangers-esque to me. Like Tyson said, I felt definitely on a team. Mm-hmm. Everyone felt balanced to me, and it just felt really good. So, as is, I don't think it needs it. But I think you do have an opportunity, maybe to add a little bit more interest to the game there if you're interested, in trying to figure out a way to add a little bit more variability to the player. And I think one way that could be done is the transition from player to mech. I also thought it was a little strange that nothing happened to my hand when we transitioned to mech. I really liked that my generic
especially because weren't the boss powers different than when we started?
Yeah,
and our abilities did switch.
Our abilities did change. Our abilities became more powerful.
Ours did, but our deck didn't switch.
So to that, but the deck didn't change.
Maybe there's an opportunity in there that when we switch to mech, you unlock a few new cards that go into your deck.
Well, and even in
Power whatever it may be, I just think.
Or maybe
some player variability could be cool.
Like the combo. Maybe the combo could go off easier too when you switch.
It did. Your combo did get easier when you switched.
Right.
No, but I'm saying like on the card when you're doing like a team attack with somebody like that.
If you're in mech mode,
less because it was still 4 on all my cards.
So
So focus is still 4 on every single card when it could have been 3 instead.
Right.
And that's what I was thinking as well. That I think that in mech mode there should be bonuses potentially for the more supportive kinds of things, because you're trying to work as one unit rather than
supposed to be this
4 or
big
5 individuals making sure that they're watching out for each other and making sure that the things are getting done. You're working as one unit. So I could see some changes there. But just quickly going back a little bit to what Adam was saying is that I agree. I don't think it's necessary to make it, to change it. I think the game works as it is. You don't have to add anything. And I don't want this to be a deck builder. I don't want it to feel like I'm actually trying to draft cards into a deck. But I could see you getting some sort of reward for beating a scenario. Like you get something, the Blue Ranger or Blue Spectrum Force member or whatever is getting something, or you're getting something that works maybe for your mech abilities that works together that everybody gets to add. You get some
even
choice.
like a super heal,
So,
like we were really getting
legacy
damaged.
Well, I would
Essentially.
say
Some legacy components.
I'm against pretty much everything you guys have suggested,
Okay.
except for maybe adding some tweaks to the individual cards when you're in mech mode. I don't think you should be adding cards to the deck as far as this is not a role-playing game in the sense that you're doing an epic quest that tells a story and you're leveling up across scenarios. It's like Legendary. You open it up, you unbox one scenario, you play it, you do your 30-minute episode after you get home from school, and you get on with your life.
Yeah, that's
like
very kind of,
you're supposed to be able to. I think you're supposed to be able to open this up and play it, and you shouldn't have experience sheets. And you're like, okay, how many games have I beat?
I agree with that.
How do I add So I don't think you should add any cards to the deck.
But if there's a linear progression,
But from there already is a linear progression from non-mech mode into mech mode. So the game already has.
no, I'm talking a linear progression from scenario 1 to scenario 2, unless it's like one-off scenarios. And if
But,
that's what
I
it
don't
is,
think
that's
it's trying
fine.
to tell a story. Like I don't think the point of this isn't Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think you should be leveling
it's
up
like
a
a
character
totally
across multiple play sessions.
But have you ever played a legacy game
Yeah.
like Pandemic or
Yeah, no,
And
I've
I
played
love the
legacy
linear
games,
progression.
but
I'm not
that's-
saying this needs to be a legacy game. I don't think so.
No, I don't
But
think so.
I do love progression. That's all I'm saying is that I do want to see some changes. Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle is a game, deck builder. Don't want you to, again, make it
right,
a deck
that's a
builder.
deck builder. So when I was saying
no,
deck builder,
here's the difference. It
Right.
adds new mechanics in it. At one point, it will, if you play book 4, you get to add dice to it. In book 5, you get to add these new tokens or new cards or abilities that you get. There is progression.
But you can do that with scenarios.
That's what I'm saying.
So in
I'd
another
love
scenario,
to see
right? But I would
progression.
not touch the player decks. I would not touch them. And like if you need scenario-specific cards to go in each deck, that's fine. But I don't think that's. I don't know. I think I like what you're going for here already, which is trying to make 5 tuned decks that work well together. That depends on the player's skill in piloting them to be able to beat the harder scenarios, and not in just here are some cards. Like I think it's a better. I think you'd get a better game if you held yourself to that standard of I have this deck, and this is my one thing that stays static is my player decks, and then the scenarios revolve around that. Because if everything's just changing all the time, it's very hard to balance anything. You get a better game if there's some type of consistency.
But I'm going to disagree with you on the better game phrase. I just think it's a different game, and I don't think either one are wrong options.
Right.
I think that they will do different things. It's ultimately up to you, Adam, as the designer, what you want to do and get out of the game. And if either of these are the options you're going for, do it. I think what we're saying is there are a lot of good things working with this game, and that's what I feel about it, is there is a lot of great things working with it. There are ways that you could add some stuff to it, and that's what I'm suggesting.
Right. And I'd be
If
fine.
that's
I'd be
what you
fine
wanna
with
do.
like if you want to do an expansion of like a Spectrum Force Green and add
Yeah.
Spectrum Green, and that's just a whole nother deck. I would agree with that, but I wouldn't say like, oh, just add these cards to each deck, and because then I think you're getting into. I think that the player decks, hero decks should be kept as their kind of solid thing, and then that the scenarios and the scenes and stuff should change around them. And I think that gets you closer to the kind of Power Rangers feel.
Yeah.
And it's not, because this isn't a deck builder, and I like that it wasn't a deck builder. I
Agreed.
like that I started with a good deck that did something, and it didn't rely on me to piece together a good deck that worked together. I like that a lot, as opposed to Legendary, where sometimes your deck just doesn't come together. In a lot of I draft a lot of card games, and sometimes you're like, okay, I'm drafting this path, but then the payoff cards never show up. Or you get this really great payoff card that requires something to build up to it, and the pieces just don't come together. And then the whole game just kind of feels like, meh, well, I kind of punted in the draft phase of this, and so the rest of the game's eh. I like that my deck is good.
Yeah.
It works in a certain way, and if I figure out how to really maximize it, we can do some damage and figure out, okay, I can really do some piercing damage on this turn. When should I take my turn to really maximize that?
Yeah.
And I really like all that. And the more that I learn the deck, the better I get at it, and the more that I can improve. And then, yeah, I'd like to play other decks. And so, I don't know. I really like what you have here. I'm all for adding the variability and the change to it, but I don't think that, that this game is looking for individual character growth as the place to get that type of progression. And I don't think the source material was looking at individual character growth. Like, they didn't really grow the characters like they said. They're just like, well, we'll replace you with another actor and call that character growth. So, yeah, I think
that's where if you are looking for some kind of variability, what you can do to keep it static, you don't have to switch the deck up at all. You could just have two different characters that are the same color and have a different weapon and a different Zord.
Right, yeah.
And then that can be a change that, you could be like, well, I'm getting kind of tired of this pay one or exhaust to draw a card or exhaust to gain an energy. I would rather do this, and I want this weapon that instead of has dual strike, it has pierce. So you can make, I don't know, many different ones without even having to even touch your main deck. In that way, it keeps it a little fresh, because, I don't know, maybe after you play every single character through, you're going to get tired of the game and be like, well, I kind of understand how the game is played. It's going to get a little stale. I mean, we can play all these different scenarios, like maybe Bulk and Skull are getting attacked. And
gotta rescue some dunderheads.
Ernie is...
Well, and that's a area
nice
that you
game.
can do, is that you can make different objectives, which could be really cool. Right.
Yeah.
Well, but I still think there's something to what Tyson's saying, and I agree with Ryan that I don't think you should be adding cards. I don't think it's that type of a game. I don't think you should be leveling up your characters. However, just through one playthrough, I learned my character very well, and I feel like I learned the rest of your characters pretty well, because I was looking at, you were sharing your whole hands. I knew exactly what they were supposed to do, and I think if all I have to really add any kind of variability between games to me as the player is to use red instead of pink, or to use blue or yellow or even black, which we didn't use, instead of pink, it just would run out pretty quick to me. There's not enough changing here, and I think that might be what you're trying to say.
That's what I was thinking you were trying to say too, is like, as long as you could switch it up just
That's
even
exactly
a little
what I'm
bit.
saying, that there's not enough, for my playstyle personally, and this could be different. I also agree that I love the idea that it's not a deck builder. Again, I love the way that works. But for my personal play style, if I'm going to play blue, because if I'm going to play with a group of people a game and play multiple scenarios, I want to be the same character probably. I don't know that I want to be switching it up. For my play style, I don't know that if you're going to have a half a dozen or a dozen different scenarios, I'm going to play a few scenarios and then be like, okay, I've got the feel of it. I don't need to play it again, unless there is some sort of life in it, and maybe it is pulling in a new ranger, or
it could even just be more cards. We had the handful of we didn't have that many cards, and they were doubled up or tripled up. Like, I saw the same cards coming through my hand. I feel like I knew the whole deck by halfway through the game, and so it could be a bigger stack. It could just be more colors.
Or maybe you have a bigger hand size.
colors.
Instead of 4, you have 5 cards. So you see a little bit more, even though, because you couldn't play all your cards most of the time anyway. So they give you a little more opportunity to do something different. But maybe that makes you a little too powerful. Maybe it makes the game too easy. I don't know.
Right, and I think So one thing I would like to, and I know this is shifting things away a little bit, because it seems to me that your game's at a stage where you're just trying to kind of balance everything out before you start adding these scenarios and before you start adding. So you have your one scenario, you have your decks, you're trying to make sure that everything works before you start building on top of it. And I think a lot of what we're talking about speaks to how you should build on top of it when you're ready to do more scenarios and how you should do that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about just a few things that I saw with the game that are issues that I think need to be fixed in its current thing, and most of them are just a lot of some rules clarifications and stuff that could go one way or the other. So the big things, and I read through the rules a few times, I could be wrong, I could have just missed it, I apologize if I did. But it was unclear exactly how the battery drain counters worked on the mech and when they were removed, and how, it was obvious when they put them on, but that was only from reading the activity sheet. So it's a little unclear about how the draining of the power and the draining of the battery works on the mech. It was also unclear on how often minion traits happened, because there were minions that said at the end of the turn, put a new minion onto the battlefield. And is that at the end of every turn? Is it at the end of the enemy's turn? Is it at the end of the turn where they attack? Because it can be interpreted in 3 different ways, and that's a lot of different minions. If it's only the turn they attack, that's 1 extra minion per round. If it's the enemy's turn, well, then that's roughly 3 to 4 extra minions per round. And if it's every turn, well, then it's like 8 minions per round.
Right.
And we could have been playing this game
our turn.
really wrong, and it could have been going on for a long time. But I think that would have been a fair interpretation of the rules, because all the card says as at the end of the turn, do this. And so if you have 2 of those out, we were in a scenario where possibly we should have been putting 2 minions on the battlefield at the end of every turn, and ended up with 60 grunts right away and just been screwed. So that wasn't very clear. And then when we had the double strike,
The dual
or
strike.
the dual strike, it was unclear. It said that bonuses apply to the first strike only and not to the second one, and it's unclear exactly what applies to the first one and what doesn't. Like, does the base attack of your weapon apply to both? But then something like the bonus you get from the gym, which is a +1 to attack, only applies to that? Does the base apply to the first, and any teamwork bonuses apply to the first, but not to the second? So I'm not clear exactly what you get on that second strike and dual strike. Do you get everything? Do you get nothing? There were also just some typos and stuff that should be reviewed.
And is it the first time per turn? Like if I attack twice, does it? If any bonuses are put to that one, is it still a dual strike?
Right. So I think that was kind of the biggest thing where I just, as we were playing, I just kind of made that call so we could keep playing, because it was going to turn into a discussion and we didn't really have the answer.
Well, and another thing about that with the focus, with at the end of turn, all your focus goes away, so it made it very difficult to achieve a teamwork bonus, because I couldn't get to 4 focused, because there's no way I could play 4 different things not on my turn.
On somebody else's turn.
So it's like, it would be a little better if I could keep that focus until the end of the round, maybe, because you only have so many opportunities to play cards anyway, so it makes sense that as you're playing things, that doesn't go away. You can use that focus because it's still the same round, but you can help out somebody a little better, because those just ended up not helping. They ended up being that whole bottom part of the card, which is, well, I'm never going to do that, so.
Yeah, never going to get focused on a teamwork move. So were there any other things specifically speaking to the game? Because I think we went straight to this, like, here's how we expand on this, because I think we all feel that you have a pretty solid core.
Oh,
here
absolutely.
Like, we all had fun. This all looks, this looks like something that you could buy. If I bought this off the shelf now, I would have had fun with one of it. I would be disappointed that there was only one scenario. But other than that, I think you have a very solid core of your game.
Yeah.
So all of these things where we say you need to add on to this and add on is so we have more to come back to. Because I would play this again right now, same scenario, just harder. I would take that challenge. I would think that would be fun, and then even try and beat it on its hardest mode between the 4 of us. I think we could have fun doing that, but then I'd probably put it away until, it's kind of like And I feel this way a lot about a lot of cooperative games where it's kind of like it's a puzzle. You're trying to solve it, but it's a puzzle with random elements. We don't always have the pieces that we need because sometimes the dice rolls aren't going to work out for us or whatever. But once you ultimately feel that you've solved the puzzle, you don't necessarily want to play it again. So now more scenarios help that. So I think that, I don't think necessarily, there are different ways to achieve that. We're talking about player growth, adding to the players, new decks, new scenarios, new minions, new commander strikes, new commanders, all those kind of things.
Because that's one thing about games like Legendary. It's like we're talking about, I have every expansion. Why did you need the expansion? You got bored with the cards that you had before. So
you need a little bored as much as I got so excited for the next thing that I wanted to buy the next expansion.
But in my perspective, I get bored with playing like, I kind of figured it out. So now I want something fresh. I want something new.
But even if you released, kind of speaking to what Adam I think is saying, is that even if you released this game the first time you release it comes with 8 scenarios in the base set.
Yeah,
and I've sat down with my friends to play like 5 of those scenarios, and we enjoyed that. And then you said you were releasing an expansion with 3 more scenarios. I'd go out and buy those 3 new scenarios before I necessarily finish the 8 you gave me initially.
Yeah.
So like I would be still excited. So it's not even just total boredom. I'd still just be excited for what's the new stuff? What does the green Spectrum Greens deck look like? What does Spectrum White's deck look like? Like those things would
Who's the new villain?
What are their mechanics that we want to use? Is this a discard guy? Is this a draw guy? Is this a help your buddies out guy?
Can I throw them into different scenarios from the base game, and would that work better towards that specific boss or whatever?
Right.
I like that idea.
So I do think that overall, to get your core kind of mechanics, I think you're pretty close to your core mechanics. I think the biggest issue we had with the core mechanics is the focus is a little tough to do focus teamwork unless you get like the exact right hand in that deck. And then there are a few rules that could use clarification, and then just, hit your rule book up with spell check and stuff like that. There are a few wrong words and a few spelling errors and just some missing. It's fine. Nothing we couldn't figure out. But just, check that out. Make sure your rules are a little tighter. Make sure you have everything kind of written down. The frequently asked questions section is great because that just is a great place to handle random things like that. So, just a little bit tighter on your rule book, and then whatever play you have to do, and then obviously we didn't play Spectrum Black, so we can't speak to that.
Yeah.
Double check, I don't know, we had a little issue with that. Spectrum Black wasn't played because we missed a couple of the cards, and they ended up just getting lost in our prototyping process. But double check that your print and play has all the cards.
I have a few things, none of which are really major issues. Most of it's just things that I was really impressed by. I loved how the game turned into mech mode part way through. I thought that was really cool. For us, I felt like the game started out slow for me because of how the cards came out. It seemed like we got some easy cards right up front as far as our minions were concerned. And then it felt like we got some powerful cards, and we got some chain strikes, which were able to wipe out the minions pretty quick. And I just felt from the start like this doesn't seem that challenging. I didn't feel all that engaged by how the cards came out, but I don't think that had anything to do with the design. I just felt like we got not overpowered, but we just got pretty powerful cards. We got pretty weak minions. And so just coming out of the gates, I was like, I don't know what I think about this. And I personally don't love a lot of purely cooperative games. And so, but then once that initial phase passed where we had strong cards and weak minions, and it got into more balanced, and then I felt towards the end we had the weak minions come out, so we had extra hard minions come out at the end. It got pretty challenging, and we were all kind of riding this line of getting knocked out, and our damage was building up on our locations. I felt like it got really challenging. I got really engaged. And I think it all really turned around for me quick at that point. I was really impressed by the balancing of the characters. I didn't feel like there was a weak link anywhere. I didn't look at anyone's character and think, I don't ever want to be that character. And I also didn't look at anyone's character and think they were overpowered or something where I felt like, oh man, I'd want to be that character because I feel like that's the best character. I couldn't find a worst or best character, which I thought was really great. And I also thought that the abilities were different enough. I loved Ryan's Spectrum Red, where it was all about discarding cards and got more powerful the more he discarded, whereas Colin and Tyson seemed to have to like build up these extra tokens, whether it was arrows or focus or whatever.
Well, and even between those, Colin felt like he was cycling a lot more, and mine was about just different ways to gather those tokens by combining my powers, which I thought
they
was
were
cool.
all so different, but it was so balanced. It was so
really
balanced.
Good. Yeah, I thought it was really good.
And that's
it
what
was
made me
smooth.
nervous about saying, hey, we need to add stuff to these
Yeah,
decks.
yeah.
As you move on, you're just like, I think you have a really good, getting
It's
a
a
good deck at
very
a really good
balanced.
point is a tough thing to
Yeah.
do. Like, I've built a lot of decks in my life, and that
Yeah,
tweaking and getting, and if you
It
get it
seemed
really
very,
there,
very tuned.
where it's like honed in, and you're just like, okay, cool, this deck is humming, everything's the synergy, it's all very fun, and so giving that, then telling players to just kind of customize it. Well, they're going to take out the boring cards that they feel don't do anything, but actually set you up in a way that you don't understand, and the deck's not going to do as well. And so
But
that's what I'm
that's
saying.
fun in some ways, too.
Right, and that's fine.
To see
But that's
yourself
what I'm
fail
saying
because
is
of
just
your own
like,
stupidity.
right, if they do a very good job if he does a very good job of designing the player decks as, sealed, good design units, I think that a lot of the fun that we got out of the game was that. The fact that we all got 4 unique decks, like Adam said, that didn't feel overpowered, that all felt they had their spot, and none of them felt overpowered or underpowered. And that's really tricky to do. Like, deck building doesn't go for that, because it's going for, here are all these cards
Take what
kind of
you
put
want,
it together, kind of thing like that.
So another thing I really ended up liking that I didn't think I was going to like is I got the healer type.
Yeah.
And
He
they're
was super
laughing.
complaining about
They're
it.
laughing because off camera before we started playing, anytime there's a player variability and powers and stuff like that, there's always a healer, and they're usually super lame and so weak, and they just sit back out of the game and just try to heal everyone else while they play the game. So I hate being the healer in any game. And when I drew it, I was like, oh man.
But it seemed
And-
like everyone could heal, because I was healing too.
Yeah,
Like,
there were other ways for other people to heal, but a lot of what I had to do was healing. But I really liked the healer because it seemed strong too. I felt like I could get in there and attack still as the healer. I didn't feel like I had to sit back out of the game. So I really liked the way you did the healer, which I've never liked a healer in a game before. So good job, at least from my perspective. And again, I felt like everyone was that way. Everyone could heal a little bit. We were all kind of the same in some ways, but we were all very different. Again, without
I
saying
like
too
the
much.
base
I think
powers
you did
that
an
anyone
excellent
could
job.
activate. That's cool. You had a base, especially
Yeah.
as a Power Ranger. They all have the same basic suit, so
Yeah,
that basic home base was fantastic.
yeah. And I think another thing that I thought was good thematically, I thought it was really good thematically. I did feel like I was a Power Ranger in an epic battle. I felt like we were doing big damage to them, and I felt like they were doing big damage right back to us.
Yeah, especially me getting knocked out too. That was like, oh man, like this is getting down to it. I was
Right.
worried that like it's if no one gets hurt that bad, that it's
Right.
too easy.
But Power Rangers always tend to have some sweet battle damage by the end of the fight. They all get
Oh
their
yeah,
their
having
burn
sparks.
marks from
Yeah,
all the
sparks
sparklers.
flying out everywhere.
All those brutal sparkler hits.
So I really liked that
You
at the
can't tell
start
we're
of the game.
unfamiliar with the show.
Yeah, right. So at the start of the game, that was something that caught my attention really quick because most games I'm used to big hits coming out in the first round, but right at the start we flip over a card and we do the boss thing, and it's like all 4 players are getting 6 attacked at 6, and I'm like, geez, like right off the bat, like it just felt like the game was always trying to hit us with big damage. I felt like we always had the capability of doing a lot of damage. I had a lot of team attack abilities that would add 5 to whatever someone else was doing. It just felt big all the time, but it didn't feel even out of balance, like we were steamrolling them or they were steamrolling us.
Yeah.
So somehow that still felt really big and balanced, which I really appreciated. It did feel like a big epic Power Ranger battle, because every show is like this big epic giant battle.
Well, and again, I gotta reiterate the whole concept of the game is designed around making you want to work together, because then you can do the better stuff. And that's the fun part of it too, which, again, like Adam, I'm not a huge cooperative fan, but when you focus it on cooperation and make it the cooperation as the really fun element of it, rather than the necessary component, I think that's really cool. And I loved that. Okay, how can we strategize getting
the biggest,
best
dumbest
thing
turn between all 4 of us? Yeah.
And we all have our ways to do that, and we can make our own choices, and I liked that a lot.
But there was not enough that they knew about me.
Yes.
It wasn't hidden information because I could just show it to anyone. There wasn't like this no table talk rule or something that prevented me from just showing my hand to everyone. But everyone had enough cards. We had enough that was different in each round that we weren't just going to go around and share all our information up front. So even though there wasn't technically hidden information, I still felt like no one could run my turn for me. And that's my biggest complaint in cooperative games, is why I dislike them so much, is that I just feel like one person can play the whole game, which, yeah, there could be a little alpha gamer going on in this, but I didn't feel like, if I didn't want them to, I didn't have to tell them what my cards were, and I felt like that could be controlled a lot more, which I did appreciate. There was still the collaboration still felt a little cooperative, but not to the extent to what a lot of cooperative games do that make me dislike them. So I actually like this cooperative game, and I don't like a whole lot of cooperative games. I love competitive cooperative games like the Legendary, where it's at any point I can choose to benefit just myself and try to go for the win and kind of screw over the team, and then, or I could try to help the team to try to not lose. I really love those types of games, and I felt like this was more towards the. I don't think I've liked a purely cooperative game as much as I've liked this game. So
this is definitely purely cooperative.
It was nice that there weren't personal points where you could like screw over your partners, which in the Power Rangers they're all working together.
Right.
So it's like, why would anybody want more points than anybody else when your goal is just take over and kill the boss?
Right.
Overthrow Rita Repulsa.
So the only thing that felt a little off to me was when I got into my mech, I didn't feel like I was in a mech. Like that didn't, going from a person, like a human being on the ground that's more exposed and vulnerable. Yeah, they're a Power Ranger or something of the like, and so they're kind of superhumans. But still, going from that into a big, solid mech, I didn't feel that switch. My character got a little bit better. Instead of healing 1 damage on my turn, I could heal 2, and my weapon seemed to just get a little bit better as well. But it didn't. I'd actually never used my mech's weapon once, which I used my fan right off the bat once, but even then I was like, why? After I used it once, I was like, why did I do that? My hands and my card are always better than my weapon. Maybe that was just the Pink Ranger. Maybe other people use their weapons.
It is a fan.
Well, I couldn't.
That's true.
I had conditions that I had to meet that made it so that it was hard sometimes to use it. So by default, it was easier to use my base weapon. But if I could, I would choose never to use my base weapon over my weapons in my hand.
And so what that created for me was, because I never was incentivized to use my base weapon, I only relied on my hand. So when I went into mech mode, all it changed is I can heal 2 damage instead of 1. That didn't feel very like I just stepped into.
I think you're are a little underselling the D8 though. Getting to roll the 8-sided die as opposed to the 6-sided die.
That was bigger. That was much bigger.
Definitely felt.
However, I think one thing that could happen that I really loved about the Mega Mech thing, I don't know what
Mega, right? The
Mega whatever it was. Is I loved how it would shoot and then how it have to recover. I loved putting those power drain tokens on it. seeing them come off and waiting for your thing to charge back up again. I would love it if you added a ability like that to each of our individual
That would
mechs,
be kinda
where you
cool.
get one thing that you can do that has a power drain on it. You can't use it for another 2 turns, but it's kind of like an exhaust for 2 turns instead
Right.
of 1. But if my mech had a mech power, that it was like this strong attack that I could do. So I've still got my kind of normal attack that I can always do, my upgrade of my fan or whatever there's where mine was like a tornado. But then my mech's got one ability that it can do that I can just exhaust for multiple rounds. Then I think I would feel like I kind of stepped into a mech. The D8 made me feel, it didn't make me feel like I was attacking for much more with the D8 because they got so much stronger. Just felt like that all went up together. But what the D8 made me do is it felt like I could defend myself better because I still felt like the rolls against me were often like D6 related, especially when it flipped out of
Yeah,
gear.
absolutely.
It still felt like those numbers stayed down, but my defense ability came up. So I felt more defended in the mech. I never felt stronger in the mech. And I think that felt a little off to me. I don't know what your mechs were like.
Well, when I had the
But I
opportunity
never
to
felt
use the
stronger.
mech
I felt like I
ability,
should've.
I felt like, oh wow, that's a big, with the 8 attack and the power boost and the initiative or insight.
Insight, yeah.
Did the power of your weapons increase when you flipped
No,
them?
no,
Still at
mine
2,
didn't.
yeah.
Mine was still a 2.
See, I
So
think
yeah,
that's
going
part
up
of it.
to a
Maybe
3.
like bumping that up to a 3
Yeah,
on your
or a
base
4.
weapon.
I mean, mine
I
did
think 4
1
might be a
given
little
damage.
much, but
My weapon gave one extra damage, but I just never used it because of the cards in my hand, just like Adam's saying.
I'm just realizing I never flipped my weapon over through the whole thing. I had it on
Yeah,
silver,
and then
yeah.
as I said before, just with the focus on every card in the deck, make it 3 instead of 4, just like the weapon was, because otherwise that's no kind of bonus. It didn't really help me to play any of my cards. I felt very much the same as when I was a human.
Yeah.
Humanoid.
So I
Big
think-
human.
Although, and honestly, I
Samus.
think actually Adam's changed the most because all of yours were based on die rolls that all of a sudden got a lot more likely you were going to hit on a D8.
Yeah.
So you
That
actually
was
did
cool.
get a significant bonus to your fate by using
That's
the D8 as opposed to the D6
Yeah.
that the rest of us didn't
I
get.
like that a lot.
You know, but in my mech thing, I was able to mill through my deck faster to charge up my Inferno
But I still
faster.
didn't feel like I was in a mech. If
If
I
I-
had that
yeah.
mech power, like it's a
Yeah, I do like the
super
energy based,
blaster
right?
or
The
your
energy based
sword
power
is just
off.
like this mech sword or
Right.
something where you can just like exhaust yourself for multiple rounds or do that energy drain or whatever that is with your own mech. I don't think it should be as big as this big mech because I assume that's the mech where all of our
All
Yeah.
all
five
the
of
Power
them, right,
Rangers
they're
jump
all
into their
four.
own individual like
Right.
small machine thing, and then all the machines get into the big thing. So I think that was representative of the big,
Right.
all of us combined. So I don't think our mech should be as strong as this, but I think if we did have something that we could exhaust, twice
Or
or
power drain or something.
yeah, with a
like
power
that. Yeah.
drain on our own mechs, that would have been really cool for me. It would have made me feel more mech-like. What is a mech going to do? Because everything I could have done that was in my hand, yes, the fate got better, but everything that I could have done as a human in my own hand, and I never really paid attention to my normal weapon,
Mhm.
my hand just never changed. And
Mhm.
yes, the odds got better, and yes... So that but I didn't. I want to feel like I just stepped into a mech. Now I've got this big gun I can use. Now I'm in my machine. It's got this huge cannon on it that even if I had as a person, I couldn't carry around and use. There's a reason I stepped into this giant mech. It's going to defend me more, which I felt like the game did. I felt defended more, but I did not feel like I have mech power now.
Right.
So-
Yeah, and maybe, and I think on that you can even, I don't know. There's a lot you can do if you want to get really intense with it. You can do things like flip cards where you turn your hand upside down and then like the mech stuff's on top, or you can turn it up and it's in mode. So like there's a lot of stuff you could do with that. I think that looking into, I think ultimately we want to try and add some variety to the game, like I think you're going to through scenarios and stuff like that. Make it feel a little more, I think it would speak to your progression thing as well, is if you felt a little bit more like you were in a mech and you progressed a little more and your cards changed, not just what was on the board, but also what was in your hand changed a little bit when you turn into a mech. and then try and tighten up some of your rules and make sure that everything's real clear. And get a few more random people to play test it and say, I didn't understand this rule or I didn't understand that rule. But other than that, I think you built a pretty solid game that we all really enjoyed. And keep at it, keep refining your system, adding scenarios, and we'd be excited to see where this would go. So thank you very much for sending us your game, and have a great day.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Thanks,
good
Sam.
luck.